Ja, je moet gewoon slideshow.
All right. Well, it is my great pleasure. I'm Karen Pearson, and I am really so thrilled to be joined here by Noah Tagger, who is finishing his associate's degree in menswear. He has been working with the Sustainability Council now for 2 years. And prior to coming to FIT, he actually really celebrated much of what I am so passionate about, which is a STEAM education background. He actually completed a Bachelor's of Arts from Amherst College in computer science, and he double majored in studio art, but really wanted to spend more time focusing on design, specifically within the textile industry and menswear. So he came to FIT, as I said, 2 years ago. Prior to that, he was a practicing graphic designer with a financial communications firm, as well as doing much freelance work in the space of really that intersection between technology and design. He has had the great privilege, or I have had the great privilege, of collaborating with him on a number of different initiatives, both within FIT and also within the entire SUNY system. During the pandemic, he actually worked collaboratively with myself and a group of faculty and students from across the college on developing more inclusive PPE, personal protective equipment that was inclusive in its design process, but also was designed to be zero waste, so therefore did not have the same impact on the environment. Today, he will be joined in conversation with Borre, who is just really an inspiration and a leader. We're going to have 2 kind of partner conversations related to his journey and story today. But I will not take any thunder. Again, it's such a great pleasure to introduce both Noah and Borre, and I will pass the baton over to Noah, and please enjoy. And if you have questions, please use the chat, type them in. We'll try to have time to answer those at the end. But for everybody's knowledge, we do have a hard stop here at 12:30 because we are all going over to sit on the WODO roundtable conversation. And so you can kind of move over to that next session link with us. All right, so thank you. Noah.
Sure, thank you, Karen. So first of all, I'm just so excited to be here today. Borre, it's really an honor and a pleasure to speak with you and listen to you. I mean, I've been a fan for such a long time, and you know, you're an inspiration to me in the field. And I'll take some time to kind of give a bit more of an introduction onto you and to inform our audience if they don't already know kind of what your history is. So Borre Akkersdijk has been involved in textile development for over 12 years. He co-founded ByBorre, which is a studio that rewires the production process of knitted textiles. It's located in Amsterdam, and it houses both a knit lab and an atelier, as well as a curated library of yarns and the latest of industry innovations from a network of industry experts, basically kind of like linking and connecting people within the industry that would otherwise be siloed off and inaccessible. This also includes Create, which is ByBorre's own design tool that serves as a digital interface, giving creators the freedom to create textiles while also prioritizing and playing with responsible design and innovative textiles. So yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, it's just really a pleasure and an honor to speak with you today. I know you've prepared a brief presentation. I also have some questions that I'm super interested to hear your response to, but if you want to start with that presentation, be my guest, and then we can launch into the questions after. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Thanks for the introduction, and pleasure being here. I can share the screen, and then I have a presentation, so I'll go through the steps, and won't make it too long, so that we have some time to discuss still.
Fantastic. Sounds good.
Do this. Do you see?
No, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, 1 second.
Yeah, now we see your screen.
Perfect. Hope you. Do you also see me in the top left corner, or just the screen?
Yeah, we can see your camera as well.
Okay, let's see if I can flip that away. Hoppa. Well, at least
it's perfect. It looks great. It looks good.
Most of it. It was actually funny. I was when they were making the presentation, I was laughing. I was like, "Oh shit! I have an old picture of of me when I was at FIT in 2007, and I think it was back in the days it was like sort of like people were running for president, and it was 2007 was Facebook just started, so everybody had pictures like this person for president, that person for president. So I had an old picture for Bo for president, but I couldn't get into my old Facebook account anymore. So then they said like, oh yeah, we put another picture on it. But I will not bother you too long with it. Hey, waarom gaat hij niet naar de volgende? I cannot skip to another. Okay, perfect. So, well, like as you said, we have a textile studio, and everything in our studio is all about textiles. But I think the most important, like, part where I came from, and also what I think is very important in our studio is just the acknowledgement that everybody has, but sort of how can you work from it? Sort of the textile industry is broken, but how can we also do something about it? How can we actively be part of a solution? And so doing that is like, how can we work on the future of textile creation? And how can we make sure that while we are doing that, we really focus on the generations that will change it? And I believe that creators are the gatekeepers of doing better. So I also want to make sure that the whole generation of creators that is there are able to build more meaningful and responsible products. So that's also the mission that we have in at ByBorre, and a part of that, of course, with Create. And what I didn't know before when we started researching was actually that sort of 80% of the environmental footprint is made in the creation of the textile. So, of course, when we make product out of it, we need to understand like how much do we have to make, and how can we make sure that everything is sold through. But the real questions in what fiber am I using? Where does that fiber come from? How do I arrange the shipment? How do I do the coloring and the dyeing of the process? Where do I make the textiles? Where do the textiles ship to? How much do I actually make? Actually occurs that you can really make the biggest impact in the creation of your textiles. And but there's always a beginning, of course. So now we are here with a studio of 45 plus in Amsterdam, and working for like hundreds of innovative brands and brands that we help with textile creation and their production. But that was, of course, not where I started. And so I want to start at a little bit in the beginning at a little video. Let's see if it works like that. So that was actually a video I made for my graduation together with a friend of mine from the academy. And I remember making it and having ideas like, how could I control in the future the whole process? So I knew I didn't have a whole factory. So what we did is literally build a miniature factory where we had a mind, and I thought, like, how do I create the textile? How do I make it from the yarn? And how do I take it through the steps until I create the garments? And these were actually the garments that I showed a little less than a year later, where you see on the right side the garment that the video was inspired on. And that was my first Paris Fashion Week, where I didn't want to show materials or items to say, like, well, this is what I'm going to sell, but I wanted to show my process. I wanted to show the dialogue that I had with the machines, and also my curiosity of what happens if you look at all the programs. What happens when you start hacking the programs? What happens when you start asking the questions if you change yarns? And things like gradients came out. Suddenly I could make long repeats and very bulky textiles by hacking the machines from the mattress industry. And it was a big part of my initial thought of, I want to always keep on pushing the boundaries and seeing where it comes from and control the process. And that later on really helped me to also start to opening up, because I was asking questions on the machine, as well asking questions on the yarn, and I really wanted to start to sell textiles. And in the beginning, nobody understood our textiles, and in a way you can understand, in a sense, when you see the clothing before, that this is not every brand. It's not like a t-shirt. It's like, oh, let's use these textiles. So the first brands we spoke to, everybody came back, is like, no, that's your art. That's not for us. Like, we don't believe in those textiles. So as sort of the only way I thought to explore it and show it was, okay, then we will show it ourselves. So we started showing all our own things on Paris Fashion Week, and just to go there. And the funny thing was, when we were planning it, we were inviting people to say, like, oh, who wants to meet us? And literally everybody that in the years before, when I was doing consultancy, and everybody that said, like, oh, when you ever do an own brand, I want to visit or sell it or buy it, nobody reacted. So what we thought was, let's make a mobile showroom to anticipate on all the buyers' actions, because most of them said, like, oh, we're too busy. We're hopping from the one show to the other. I only have 5 minutes in front of Rick Owens, or I only have 5 minutes there. So we said, like, it's cool. Which 5 minutes? And we will drive the van right in front of it. So we sort of hacked also Paris Fashion Week. And for several seasons, this was already the season after it, we were going through Paris with our vests on, just parking in the middle of the street to showcase our textiles and what we were doing differently. And after 2-3 seasons, the first few buyers from Japan started understanding it. And actually, by now, we have done 11 seasons of that showcase to show what we can all do with our textiles. But that went from single jerseys to double jerseys, jersey terry, triple jerseys, what you see here on the picture. And season after season, we also introduced new styles and new yarn suppliers and new other yarn suppliers out of their networks and machine suppliers, to showcase that we were not doing it alone. And the funny part of that was that after, I think it was 5 seasons, the first brands that we used to speak with before start circling back, and they were saying, oh, but the textiles that you're making now, like I could use those for my brand. Oh, those I can use for like a MA1 or for like a pant or a jumpsuit. So people started understanding why we're actually making that showcase. And that was also the moment when we said, okay, let's take all that knowledge that we gathered over these years and that we used to work together with the machines and all the suppliers and start to opening it up. Because you can make impact by yourself and tell a beautiful story. But if you open source your knowledge and you start sharing that, a lot of brands and a lot of creators can make impact with you. And I saw so many brands keeping all these innovations for themselves, where I thought like, wow, that's so actually horrible. Like you have a great solution and then you're gonna keep it for yourself for your own financial gain. And so we started thinking on how to showcase our innovations for design and our software that we used personally internally to design towards the knitting machines. And that in the last couple of years really rolled out into, well, as the zine called it, the Photoshop of textile. Pull this up.
This is Borre, creative director of ByBorre. You know, these textile trailblazers. He's thinking about a new plan, ByBorre inside. This is the child inside Borre, and this is his imaginary friend, Rex. Today, they'd like to show us how it feels to be truly free as a textile designer. Imagine a playground where you can do anything and control everything. Well, it looks like Rex and the child inside Borre will be gone for a while. And let's be honest, Tig got a great driving style. Thanks, guys. This is Borre, creative director of ByBorre. This is Borre, creative director.
Yes, it worked. Stuck in the loop. So that dream of trying to sell textiles suddenly came back because on the one hand we were showcasing what we could do, and brands were looping back. But most important, actually, the whole supply chain started using our showcase to showcase our textiles, also to showcase their machines, to showcase their yarns, to showcase their stories. And we really thought like, wow, we need to open this up just as in the software world and treat this dream as an open source mindset. Oh, back at a video. Wait, let's see.
This is Borre.
This is okay. And where we are at now is very much the tool and opening it up to all creators. So also young creators that just start with university or still have to go to university, to students that are there. But the same we do for big designers that work from Prada to Rolls-Royce or BMW. And we narrowed it down to 3 steps. So choose your textile composition, create your colors, and apply your artwork so that you're totally free and control and own your final designs. And this is how that looks. So within Create, we have textile packages. And these textile packages are actually showcasing and telling the story of all the different yarn suppliers we work with. So all the impact references are in there, also where the supplier is based, where we could work on it. And when you choose one of those packages, you can start working with colors and base colors. So in that, we started developing, and that I found super interesting, was sort of how does the machine really work, and how do all the yarn colors come together, and how does that work when you optically start mixing that. And you can optically mix the colors before actually sampling. So you reduce in samples, you create digital, and you only knit your final knit down. And that goes by the meter. Where back in the days was, if I did one knit sample and it was allowed in the factory, what was already difficult, you had to do like 10 meters on a run. You couldn't do all runs at the same day. So it will take months to develop these steps. And by now you can actually really build a design with layers. So you can add several layers to it. You can add different types of fill patterns to it, and you will see what happens. What you see is what you get edited. So every step along the way, you see your creation becoming more your own creation.
Het is leuk om je werk op verschillende manieren gemaakt te zien. Of het nu allemaal dikke doosjes, of stencils, is, maar in dit geval is het gebruikt eigenlijk een soort component gemaakt. Iets wat vroeger in kastelen de warmte in het pand moest brengen. Waar minder strenge wonderrijke liederen bij. Ik vond het ook idioot om dat krankzinnige apparaat feestmachine waarin gebruikt wordt. En het was eigenlijk, dit is dan het originele. Sint Joris en de draak, het gevecht tussen goed en kwaad. Dit is gewoon een simpele samenwerking tussen twee mensen die een ambacht verstaan. En dat is belangrijk.
So what is very nice now is that we actually created a tool that even creators that have never worked with textile can use the medium of textile. What you just saw was one of the most famous tattoo artists from the Netherlands, and he worked with a Create to translate his textile and his concept into a textile that later on was used for a full collection. I'll skip this one very briefly because we have another one of Davy that is a painter from the Netherlands, and you see that her paintings would translate in a full collection too. So what we are doing now is not sitting on the chair of the designer ourselves, but stepping back off the stage and out of the spotlight and saying to all creators, young, old, wherever you are in the world, like, take the stage, make sure here is the medium of responsible textile, and start creating yourself. And following the steps of brands like Adidas that created a non-dyed collection with it, or a Porter that did a whole series of bags with it. A Capital that did all types of different vests that translated their ideas into the vest, or a BMW that used it for futuristic concept cars where they did all the seating and even put light under the seatings. So from interior to automotive, from high-end fashion to sportswear, now it's open for creators to do what they do and to level the playing field for all creators, young and old. But make sure that that is something that you can always use. And today I'm sitting in the window of textile opportunity. That is the space where we showcase all the yarn suppliers, machine suppliers, also packaging suppliers, even the needle suppliers of the machines, to give also the whole supply chain a stage and say, like, we all do it together. We all need to make the steps, and that will make the big change. And this is also a real life spot where we will actually name it a sort of a play center where creators can do their thing and really learn and also showcase what they do. So I think it would be nice to talk a little bit about this. And then I will stop sharing the screen. Let's see.
Cool. That sounds great. Thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through that. I found that presentation incredibly insightful, and it actually answered a bunch of the questions I had for you today. So I'm glad you.
Sorry, man.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. I have a lot, so there will be more than enough questions to be asked. But one of the things that I was wondering you could touch on is this theme of intersectionality, right? It's very much prevalent in your work and ByBorre as a company. My background, as Karen mentioned, is in both technology and in fashion and design. And you kind of touched on how technology empowers your company and your software to make design easier for your clients. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that and how technology is instrumental in the change in the field today?
Well, I think the digitalization, like when I realized that there is nothing that we use more than textile in our lives. You're born wrapped in textile, and your whole life you're engaged with textile. The moment that I started diving into the process, how it is made, was suddenly very clear that there was still no digitalization throughout the whole supply chain. So as a creator, you were actually standing on fairs where you in real life had to see what other people already made without being able to add your concept or just search it, or like it was a very old school sort of waterfall approach from silo to silo. And what I started seeing was that it is such a difficult process, and all the big brands have processes for it and silos for it. But with digitalization, we are able to now combine those processes, give understanding and transparency to where all these processes are and which ones are better and which one are not, and to also skip processes like sampling, or at least a big part of those processes. Of course, you need samples for a tactile world, but I think that digitalization will make it accessible across borders, makes it accessible across industries, makes it accessible for everybody that also does not have a business card of a big brand. Because otherwise, back in the days, you couldn't walk into a factory and say like, oh, do you want to run a sample for me? Because, well, there was no business case for the factory to do it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you actually touched on something that I wanted to mention as well, which is this theme of accessibility. Like it feels very intrinsic to your story, from literally like, you know, when you mentioned driving the van around, that's making your product as accessible as possible, right, to your consumer or the people you want to see in front of it. And now like what ByBorre does with Create, making, you know, the process of textile creation accessible to as many designers, big or small. But I was thinking also in terms of like going back to intersectionality, you know, the idea of like education and accessible education on like how the industry works. And, you know, I've seen conversations and interviews with you where you talk about the fact that like, unfortunately, most people don't know what's going on in the textile world. Like it is behind closed doors. How do you think like we best tackle that kind of like the accessibility of education and knowledge into how the industry works?
Well, I think there's I think honestly that everybody also that everybody wants to do better. Like I hope that. Like I think there's a positive side to that. So even brands that at this moment are massively greenwashing, I truly believe that they do it from a point that they honestly think that they're telling a good story. Yeah. So what happens is that mostly they look at the full process well, for instance, 20 steps. And then they say, oh, this one step, we use recycled materials. Let's put the story on this part. And then they forget to tell the rest of the story. And what happens is that you tell a small part of the story. But if I tell the story of like, wow, I eat an apple every day, so I'm super healthy, that doesn't tell the whole story, because in the morning I eat McDonald's and in the evening I eat another hamburger. So that wouldn't be an honest and transparent story. So where I believe the first steps are to really do better is to start to say to everybody, let's make all the steps transparent. We are asking as end consumers, we are asking as creators, we are asking as legislators, everything needs to be transparent, because behind transparency, you cannot hide.
Mhm.
And even if you do something not that great, if you're transparent about it, people are able to start to help you, or that solutions can be put forward. So that also means, how much is your sell through?
Mhm.
And at least that we can control with companies. We cannot tell everybody to record how many times they wear it and stuff. I hope brands will start doing that, but I truly believe that transparency is the key.
Mhm.
And to be able to do that, the whole supply chain needs to start to be open, because we don't know what happens behind closed doors. And it is also mostly bad things. So I think opening up the transparency from the suppliers towards the creators, giving the creators the opportunities to tell honest and amazing stories to all the consumers, so that they can start sharing it and that they can start educating each other.
Mhm. And how much responsibility do you think lies on legislation in terms of like forcing kind of companies and suppliers to be more transparent, or do you think it should come from the consumer and the creators primarily?
No, I think well in the beginning I said, like, for me, creators are the gatekeepers of doing better. They are
Mhm.
a small part of the community that are between the big brands, or in the big brands, and the consumer, that make the choices on what products are we going to make, what materials are we going to use, how it's going to be colored, how are we going to tell the story. So if they are educating themselves, they will tell a more educated story and be more transparent to the end consumer. And that will be a start, so that the end consumer can start making choices, because they get choices. At this point, they mostly get half stories. So
Mhm.
I think legislation in that part is going to be a very, very big role.
Mhm.
And it needs to clarify. But the moment that we are going to, like, make sure that everything needs to be transparent, also legislation can be done, because you can only legislate things where you know what the steps are and what is going wrong. And I
Mhm.
think a great example is how several countries are handling single-use plastic. There's so
Mhm.
much energy and so much oil going into the making of a product. The product is used one time. Do we agree this? And then it's thrown away and it needs to be recycled. Do we agree on this process? Yes or no? No? Okay. So that we can also do with, for instance, fashion or other textile products. But how much raw materials go in the making of the product, how much products are made, how much products are sold through, and how much in average is wasted in between. Do we agree on that? Yes or no? And then suddenly we're going to look at stories then from, oh, we work with a recycled cotton very differently, because we're going to say, like, well, you used 10 times the amount of raw materials than you actually are selling through. So
Mhm.
yes, it is an organic cotton, but like that, we don't really like this. This is not what we agree on. And then legislation can play its part.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I think that's definitely the direction that the industry needs to go, and I think that is the role of legislation in directing that. We've got about 8 minutes left, and I want to open up the floor to the attendees. If they have questions that they'd like to ask you, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and I'll just read them out. So I'll give you guys. I'll ask Borre a question in the interim while people are typing their answers, and then we'll get to those. But I was interested, in kind of taking it a step back, and I love that you talked about your early career and the fact that you were at FIT and like what your kind of like steps to founding ByBorre looked like. I was wondering if you had any like mentors or people who were really kind of like inspirational to you along the way.
I think it's super important, like getting chances from people, or opportunities from well, opportunities can also be access to internet, access to programs, access to a computer. But I think the moment that you have the luxury to have well, for instance, school, that helped a lot. the chance that I could go to FIT for one semester really broadened my horizon, that how hard it was to get there, but it was possible. And I had a few people that were very important, loose from my uncle, that always said, follow your heart and make and try to translate that in your career. And but I had Maarten Baas, that was a designer in the Netherlands, that gave guest lectures at my school, and we made a simple project, and it was just a funny outcome. It was a scarecrow, so it had nothing to do with, but the aesthetic was fun. And he said, I like the thing that you made, so I'm going to take it to one of my shows in Milan. And it showed me that somebody had interest, somebody took a chance on me, he invested a little bit in me, and he gave me stage. And every time somebody offered something to me, I saw that, well, if you offer that to me, well, take it and go for the chance. And that happened also with Lee Edelcourt in Paris, where she gave me some chances, like, oh, you can present yourself to a company, and then I went for it. So yeah, there's definitely people that gave me chances and gave me a stage to shine. And mostly that was on the beginning, on internships too.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I definitely know how important mentors have been in my experience, and yeah, it seems like they really were there for you as well. I'm gonna go through some of the questions in the chat. The first one is from Bridget, wondering if ByBorre has a presence in New York City at the moment, and what that might look like.
Not yet. But we're working. I will be in New York next week. I just heard. But we are working upon expansion. So the space that I'm in here, so the window of textile opportunity, is a space where we want to facilitate creation, facilitate play, and we are now looking at several spaces in the world, places in the world where there's a high density of creators, and from there we can expand also digital access and create boxes so that you can send home. But we are looking to make one in New York. So I think, anywhere next year, you're gonna hear about us, definitely in New York.
Awesome. Yeah, we will keep our ears and eyes peeled. So from Ksenia, thank you for your inspiring presentation. Could you please share which technologies you focus on at ByBorre apart from circular knitting? And does your business focus on textile creation or also end products and act as a product design agency?
Well,
so a couple questions in there.
let me do them one by one. So, material-wise, we focus on a lot of different core materials. So that goes from man-made fibers to natural fibers and everything in between. That is an ongoing research, but it is at the moment for circular knitting. So we do explore a few other things, and I believe that in the future it will broaden. But at the moment, it's definitely circular knit. So but we do it for base layers, mid layers, automotive, interior. So from that, you can already go almost everywhere. Then as a design agency, we have some consultancy, but the focus is ByBorre Create. So the focus is really opening up that accessibility for responsible textile to all creators. But we work on special projects with, of course, some of the most exciting brands to see how can we push the boundaries and how can we push R&D. And sometimes that also entails some product creation and advice there. But we do that as little as possible, only for special projects to really push the boundaries sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's 12:28. I don't want to go over because I know you have to run to the following panel. And for anyone here that's interested, Borre and Karen and I will be on a panel with some of the WOTO partners directly following this. So make sure to tune into that. But I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time. It was really great to speak with you, and I appreciate you walking us through your story and answering some of our questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time and for your questions. And I will see you in a second.
Sounds good.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.